Hello everybody and welcome back to LRN, where today we react to the latest news from the world of Formula 1 over the last couple of days, and there's a fair bit coming out, so a fair bit to get into. Before I do though, if you are new around here, please do make sure to subscribe on the bottom right hand side, all about F1 fan opinions, so whatever you think, please do let me know in the comments below about any of the stories we discussed today. And as per the headline suggests, there have been comments coming out from Toto Wolff suggesting that Lewis Hamilton is looking at potentially staying in the sport of Formula 1 for another 5 years. So I definitely want to know in the comments if you think that that would be a good thing. Do you want to see Hamilton stay in the sport for another 5 years? Do you think that it's good for the sport if he remains around for another 5 years? Or do you think that he's kind of over the hill? Maybe he's become a bit of a toxic influence and you want to see the next generation focused on now? You think Hamilton's had his time and you want to see the likes of Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris taking the headlines and taking the forefront of Formula 1 moving forward, which is kind of it's been kind of a 50-50 split, usually depending on whether you're sort of a Red Bull fan or a Mercedes fan, at least from the people I've heard from, where you probably sit on that fence. But do let me know in the comments below what you think, if you want to see him stick around. But just before we get into the details of that, I'm just going to comment on the cost cap again and where we are with it. So obviously we were expecting a result yesterday on Wednesday as to what the result of the cost cap investigation was going to be. It was supposed to come out early in the morning in Japan. And we were finally going to find out who, if anyone, had gone over the budget caps in question, and if so, by how much, whether it be a small amount or a material amount, and then, of course, what the said punishments would be. Now, since we discussed it last, there were larger rumours that actually the potential overspend had been overblown, and that we were expecting, yes, people to have gone over, but only by small amounts, and therefore only small punishments to be issued. But then, of course, we've had a massive delay. Rather than being done yesterday and coming out yesterday, we're now going to get the result of this investigation next Monday following the Japanese Grand Prix. So definitely questions there as to why it's taking additional time, considering they announced they'd be telling us what the result was. Have they decided actually they found new evidence that needs looking into? Was it a case that there's so much media attention around this conversation at the moment they didn't want to bring any light onto themselves without making sure that they've got everything absolutely correct? Maybe they just wanted time to double check everything. Who knows? I think we could probably all agree at this stage no one has that much faith in the FIA and their processes at this time. So certainly for me, no matter what they say, I won't accept it 100%. I think there's still going to be questions to be asked about how they've come to their decisions. If suddenly, after massive rumours that Red Bull gone way over, they've not gone over or only slightly, how's that come about? Why did those rumours exist? Maybe the leaks from the FIA, which shouldn't have happened in the first place, turned out to be false. We will find out more once the result of the full investigation comes out, and we'll look at that in detail at the time. But definitely something to keep an eye on over the weekend, and hopefully when we get those results on Monday, should they finally actually issue them, we'll be somewhere closer to understanding exactly what's happened. So we'll look forward to that. But we'll get into it then with Lewis Hamilton and the comments from Toto Wolff. So he's done an interview with David Coulthard on Channel 4. And you can check it out on their YouTube channel as well if you want to go and have a look at the full interview between David Coulthard and Toto Wolff. But basically, they live next to each other, Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton. So they have, of course, we already know they have a really, really strong bond, but they essentially live a couple doors away from each other as well. So they talk privately all the time. And Toto Wolff let it slip that in private conversations, Lewis Hamilton had said he's nowhere near leaving. He had a break. I think he said he went over to Africa and he felt renewed, rejuvenated. And he's come back with a new lease of life from Hamilton's point of view. And he is ready to commit another 5 years to the sport of Formula 1. And to be honest, I wouldn't expect that. I think for me, I've always said with Hamilton, he could do that, but I think if he won his 8th World Championship, he'd call it a day. So wherever that fell in that period of time, I think he would have left. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe even if he won that 8th championship next year, he would call it, he would still carry on for another 4 years and try and make it so that he can set a level. I would assume from his point of view, he hopes drivers like Verstappen are never able to reach. Maybe he just wants to do all he can to cement his legacy as, at least in some people's opinions, the best driver of all time. And certainly I know that that's going to be a controversial topic. I know a lot of people don't rate him as highly as that. I do think he'll be appreciated more potentially after he's retired in the years past, when certain rivalries that we have at the moment have died down. I'm not in any way saying I think that he is the greatest of all time, but I certainly think his name will always be in the conversation because of the achievements he's had in the sport. And I don't think there's any getting away from that, no matter who you are a supporter of. So the question is, at this stage of his career, do you think he should be staying in the sport for another 5 years? Do you think that the way that this season has gone, maybe it's time for him to step away? Or maybe you think, no, we know how good Hamilton is, this is a bad year, and you want to see as much of him as you possibly can in the sport. And if he can stay another 5 years and he can carry on like Alonso, like Raikkonen did into his 40s, then all the better for it. You want him to stay for as long as possible. Cool. Let me know in the comments below which side of the fence you sit on and why. Absolutely love to hear from you. From my perspective, I think he should stay in the sport. For now, I certainly think he's still good enough to continue fighting at Mercedes and fighting for championships when they give him the car to do it. And I'm really interested. I want to see what happens with Hamilton and Russell when they have a car capable of challenging for that title. I think that dynamic's going to be really interesting. Of course, we want to see the fight between Hamilton and Verstappen, but actually that fight between Hamilton and Russell is just as exciting because it's an inter-team rivalry and the same machinery. And obviously, at the moment, we know Russell's won out this season. If you go back through the season, there's lots of reasons for that. And Russell has been really consistent, fantastic this season, no question about it. But give them a car capable of challenging for the World Championship, or at least equally with the Red Bulls and hopefully Ferraris and others in there as well. It'd be really good to see what happens between those two drivers. What happens if Russell starts to get a points lead? Will Mercedes do the unthinkable and start pushing Russell forward as the number one driver as they head towards the end of the season? Will that really happen? Or will the close relationship that Toto Wolff and Hamilton have end up maybe causing grief for Russell, where he starts getting annoyed because even though he's doing better, he keeps seeing Hamilton being preferred. So you could get that sort of rivalry and tension in the team between the two garages should that happen. So I'd be really interested to see that play out. Not just, as I say, Hamilton versus Verstappen, but Hamilton versus Russell would be a good fight to see at the top of the grid for top honours. I think that would be really cool. So hopefully we do get to see that before Hamilton moves on. I will retain the opinion at this stage that if he gets that 8th championship, then he will leave. I do still believe that. I may be completely wrong. He may be wanting to devote 5 years more to the sport, regardless of where he is. I mean, you look at Alonso now, further down the grid. Vettel, of course, spending a few years further down the grid after having competed for World Championships. So we know that people will do it, having won world titles in the sport. But Hamilton's been so consistent in the fact that he has other interests outside of Formula One. He loves his music, he loves his fashion, and doing Formula One is kind of becoming a prevention to him for other things he wanted to do. And I just think that 8th World Championship is the itch he needs to scratch to be able to call it a day. That's how I see it at the moment. Otherwise, I think it's just talk. But I may be wrong. He may stick around another 5 years. Let me know what you think he's going to do in the comments below. In other news as well, we've had an announcement, well, not an announcement, but strong rumours again that Ricciardo could be joining Mercedes as reserve team driver. So you'd have a team of Hamilton and Russell and then Ricciardo as the reserve. Now, is this a good move for Ricciardo? I'm not too sure. I think it's a bit of a weird one. I think that it would be better for him to take a year out of the sport rather than still have to go through all that travelling and still be around the circles of F1 but without the benefit of having a drive. I'm certainly sure he'll end up being the best paid reserve driver probably of all time in Formula One, so he'd have that to his name. But certainly I don't... He needs a break from the sport. If he isn't going to get a drive at a good team, my view is that Ricciardo needs to take a break. And I don't think that being the reserve driver will be enough of a break for him. I mean, it may be that they only require him for certain weekends. Maybe he would share that responsibility with Stoffel van Dorn, who's done it previously. And been official reserve driver this season. So maybe he could come to some sort of agreement where he actually got to spend a few of the weekends away from the sport, so he felt like he was getting that break, and maybe then it would still allow him to start to miss being that number one driver in a team, and start to maybe get his love for the sport back that he needs to become a top driver again, if that is still in him. And the jury's definitely out on that. But is it worth it for Mercedes to have him as a reserve driver? Maybe for the feedback and the experience that he brings to the team, sure. But also it's an opportunity to give a young driver in the Mercedes stable, or as they've done their Formula E drivers, a chance to show what they can do in the Mercedes car. Should, as we've talked about, Hamilton eventually will move on, and they need to think about who's going to replace him long term. I don't think Ricciardo's at the level anymore where you can consider him for a long term drive at Mercedes, but they could consider him as sort of a Bottas role, and they could go, you know what, Hamilton's gone, let's promote Russell to number one. Ricciardo's a solid number two. We don't need him to be competing with Russell. We want someone who isn't, and who's going to do that Bottas job and just be the best number two possible and never truly challenge. That could be it, and they could see Ricciardo as a perfect replacement long term for Valtteri Bottas, where of course the dynamic at the moment is very, at least for now, looks like they're far too close in performance between Hamilton and Russell to have a real clear number one and number two, other than the fact we know that of course Hamilton is the favoured driver by Toto Wolff. So again, interesting to see if that dynamic eventually plays out. He could be a good candidate for that. Again, let me know in the comments below what you think. But really, really interesting. So that's sort of been it for the last couple of days in the world of Formula One. So really interested to know what you think. Do you, in terms of the budget cap, why do you think it's been delayed till the Monday? What do you think's going on there? Do you expect it to be actually, after all of the big rumours and the big news, that they're going to come out and say that no one's gone over the cap, or if they have, it's only slightly? Or do you think they found something that they didn't expect, that has pushed someone over the top, and that's why the announcement's been delayed? They need more time to sort of clarify their findings before making that final announcement. Maybe that's why. With Hamilton, do you think he should stay another 5 years? Do you want to see him in the sport continue? Please let me know. And again, with Ricciardo, do you think it's a good move for him to join Mercedes? Do you think it's good for Mercedes if he was to go there? Or do you think that he should take a year out, take his time away, learn to love the sport, and maybe come back in a year's time if there are any seats available to him? Let me know in the comments below. But that's all the latest news today. So do let me know what you think. If you are new around here, please make sure to subscribe on the bottom right hand side. And we'll be back again on Sunday with a reaction to the Japanese GP. Will come up before. If there's any breaking news, any big stories we haven't covered, will come up over the weekend. But otherwise, we'll be back on Sunday with a review for the Grand Prix. So make sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit the bell icon to be notified when that video goes live. And make sure to get in the comments and hit a like as well to let me know you enjoyed this video. Otherwise, I'm just going to thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Enjoy the Grand Prix. Goodbye.